In today's video, I want to talk about how to use engagement strategies in an interactive read aloud lesson. Last week, we talked about the difference between a regular read aloud and an interactive read aloud. And one of those main differences is that students are interacting not only with the text, but with the teacher and their peers as well. And throughout this read aloud, we're inviting conversation from start to finish. Actually, before we even start the book, we're starting with that interactive conversation all the way up until after the book has finished. So what are some engagement strategies that we can use during an interactive read aloud lesson? Today, I want to dive into 6 different strategies that you can use, and make sure you stick around to the end because I have a freebie to go along with this so that you can use them in your classroom right away. Now, let's get started with those different engagement strategies. Now, let's get started. And before we get into each strategy, I want to stress the importance of planning out this interactive read aloud lesson ahead of time. In order to make the most of your time and the most of the lesson, it's crucial that you're planning this lesson out ahead of time. You know which questions you're going to ask and which engagement strategies you're going to use to promote that discussion, that conversation in your class during the lesson. Now, the first engagement strategy that you can use is a think aloud. And a think aloud is basically what it sounds like. You are sharing your thinking aloud with your students. You're showing them what is going on in your mind as you are reading the story. And by making your thinking public, you're showing students how to make meaning of what they're reading. And you'll be asking your students to watch you as you model what you do while you read. And it shows them how skillful readers think. And by doing this, students are engaged in not only the story, but in how you are reacting to the story as well. You'll be showing them how you activate your background knowledge, how you ask questions as you read to help you understand, and how you draw conclusions from the book that you're reading. And by modeling our thinking, kids start to understand and internalize what they need to do when they are reading on their own. So some things that you can share with them are your inner conversation, such as your thoughts, your reactions, or connections that you make to the story. You might share your questions or areas where you're confused. You're going to show them how you activate and connect to your background knowledge. And you're also going to model how you use different reading strategies to help you understand the book. The next interactive read aloud strategy that you can use to make a book more engaging is to help students turn and talk. A turn and talk is basically a brief conversation between 2 peers in response to a prompt that you give. So students will turn to their predetermined partner and share their answer to the prompt while their peer listens. And as you notice, I use the term predetermined because it's important that you choose partners ahead of time and you seat those students near each other. This will help get right into the flow of the story without causing too much interruption to your lesson. And next week, we're going to talk more about classroom management during an interactive read aloud, but by choosing a partner ahead of time, you'll be able to pair students up with a peer that they will work well with, that will be able to help each other in answering these questions. And again, creating less of a disruption by knowing who their partner is ahead of time. But a turn and talk allows all students to participate in the discussion. Oftentimes, when you ask a question, it's those more outgoing students who are going to be quick to answer the question, while students who are quieter or more shy aren't really ready to share their answers aloud with the entire class. But by giving them the chance to turn and talk to just one person, it gives them the opportunity to almost rehearse their thinking, their answer, and feel more confident before sharing it aloud with the class. And then it allows all students to process their learning while engaging in a meaningful conversation with their peer. And this really truly makes the read aloud interactive. The students are interacting with the story as well as the other students in the class. And this is also a wonderful opportunity for students to practice those oral communication skills. So turn and talk is another great engagement strategy to use during an interactive read aloud lesson. The third engagement strategy is kind of 2 put in together was 1. This is stop and jot or stop and draw. This processing activity gives students the opportunity to answer questions by either writing it down or drawing a picture in response to a prompt that's given. This is a quick check for understanding, but it also promotes retention and comprehension. And it really helps students make sense of what they're learning in the lesson by taking what you're sharing, processing it in their minds, and then getting it out onto a piece of paper. And there are quite a few things that they can stop and jot or stop and draw about, such as, what do you wonder? What do you think? What is the picture that you're creating in your mind? How do you think the character feels? What was something that you found interesting, or what was something that you can connect to? And giving students a minute to stop and jot this down and then hold it up for you gives you that quick check for understanding. And again, it's something very quick, like a jot, something very quick, and you can move right back into the read aloud of the story. And again, to make sure that this is a smooth transition for students, I recommend having them bring all the materials to the rug ahead of time before the read aloud begins, whether you use a pencil and a post-it note or a whiteboard and dry erase marker. Having those materials ahead of time will be really helpful in making sure the whole lesson goes smoothly and you're not wasting any time. And again, as I mentioned before, next week we'll be diving into classroom management during an interactive read aloud, and we'll talk about more of using materials during a lesson. Another fun engagement activity to do during an interactive read aloud is act it out. Now, this one can get a little tricky, and I don't recommend using it too often, but it gives students an opportunity to move their body and really increases engagement during a read aloud. So you may prompt them to share what they think the character is feeling or what they're doing. So for example, you can ask them to show you, what does grumpy look like? Show me with your face. Or show me how a certain character is feeling in this moment. This really helps them connect with the story. It really helps them focus on the story without getting distracted. A fifth engagement strategy is similar to acting it out. This one, it would be to use hand signals. And in this one, you would just use small movements with the student's hands to show their understanding of the story. For example, if you're asking yes or no questions, if it's a yes, students can give a thumbs up. If their answer is no, they can give a thumbs down. Again, it's this quick check for understanding, and it'll help you move quickly again through the story without losing students' focus of what is happening in the lesson. You could give them a question that has several possible answers. So for example, how do you think the friends are going to solve the problem? 1, will they talk it out? 2, will they go get their moms? 3, will they continue to argue? And your students can answer by holding up a 1, 2, or 3 with their hand. Another way to use hand signals would be to use specific signals to represent something. For example, you could teach your students that if they made a connection to something that's happening in the story, they can clasp their hands together. And you could come up with some fun ones to do with your class, but I recommend using just 1 or 2 during the read aloud so as not to become too distracting and to make sure that students are focused on the skill that you are teaching during that lesson. And the last engagement strategy that I might use during an interactive read aloud lesson would be to create an anchor chart together. So to create an interactive read aloud anchor chart that both students and you help create at the same time. So you're going to prep the chart ahead of time. You'll make an outline of the anchor chart, maybe put on the headings that coordinate with the lesson that you're teaching, maybe put the question that you want students to answer at the top of the chart. And then during the lesson, students are able to either come up to the anchor chart and write on it their answer, or you could have them write their answer on a post-it note and stick it right onto the chart. So for example, what do you think the problem is in this story? Students can write it down and they can bring it up on their post-it note and put it on the anchor chart. And this is a great thing to have in your classroom because you've created it together. It's not just something that you made and showed them, but it's been a community building activity. You all worked on it together. You were all engaged and interacting in the lesson together. So those are 6 different engagement strategies that you can use during an interactive read aloud lesson. And I have a freebie that outlines each one of these, and I will leave a link in the description box down below for you to grab and stick right in your lesson plan so that you can have it when creating interactive read aloud lessons for your class. By having students engaged, you're making your read aloud lesson truly interactive, and it will help students internalize and connect with the book and the lesson that you're teaching on a whole other level. But I know that coming up with these can be challenging because when you're writing your lesson plan, you know that you need to find the best book. You need to come up with the discussion questions ahead of time and write the lesson. You need to plan out these engagement strategies as well as the extension activities to go along with it. And it can be a lot, but by planning an effective lesson, you're truly helping your students understand what you are trying to teach. And to make your lives easier, I've created the Colorful Apple Book Club. And in this book club, you'll receive 5 fully planned out lessons each month. You'll receive one for reading, writing, science, social studies, and social emotional learning. In these lessons, students will be able to interact with the book that you are reading aloud. I've picked out the book for you. I've written out the lesson plan already for you. I have anchor charts for each book, as well as all the discussion questions, which you can print right on Post-it notes. How awesome is that? These discussion questions also come with different engagement strategies, as well as vocabulary to help students understand the story. Along with that, there are extension activities such as task cards, games, craftivities, written responses to help your students really bring the book and the skills that you're teaching to life. So I'd love for you to check out the link in the description box down below where you can join the Colorful Apple Book Club today and get all of this lesson planning off your plate, and you can focus on what you love to do best, teaching your students. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Hit that red subscribe button because next week I'll be back with part 5 in our interactive read aloud strategy series, and we're going to be talking about classroom management. I've talked all about these engagement strategies, and you might be thinking, my class can't handle that. I can't do that in my classroom. I'm here to tell you that you can, and that there are things that we need to put into place to help that happen in your classroom. So stay tuned for next Sunday night where we're going to be talking about classroom management during an interactive read aloud lesson. Have a great week.